Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is the second time I've tried to film this video. The first time this happened. Wow. Let's ramble a bit more. I'm still on sugar high. Sugar. It was a bit of a mess. But anyway, today we're going to be having a chat about Oxbridge, specifically going from a state school to Cambridge. I am a second year going into third year at Cambridge. I first of all used to go to a comprehensive state school. That's my story, you guys. That's my journey. It's been such a tough life. And today I'm going to be asking and answering some questions that some wonderful people have sent in. There are some that are going to be fairly similar, but I'll try and answer them in different ways. We'll start off with, at Cambridge, is there a social hierarchy? It depends on what you mean by a social hierarchy. I can understand how some people might think that there is one according to class. This is such a generalisation, but often people who are posher and have gone to private school have a lot of self-confidence and then put themselves out there and get into higher positions. Also, there are quite a few cliques in Cambridge, like there's the thespian clique that do lots of plays and the varsity blues, so the sporty people. But even if you're not in those like cliques, you can still like do plays if you want. You can still do sports. Academically, I mean, some people are better than others, obviously. Socially, you've got BNOCs. BNOC is an acronym. BNOC stands for Big Name on Campus. If you're really cool and popular, you are a BNOC. Well, I think with any group of people, you get some people who are more gregarious and some people who are more introverted and prefer their own space. Next one. How much does it cost all round, living-wise and education? Like any other university in the UK, it currently costs £9,250 if you are English or Welsh for tuition every year, but you can get quite hefty loans for that. The cost of living in Cambridge is quite expensive. It's not astronomical, and again, you can get quite hefty bursaries and maintenance loans, so there are ways to get around it. Accommodation at Cambridge tends to fall somewhere in between 1,000 and 2,000 a term. The average at Queen's is about £1,700 a term per person, I think. I'm just remembering this off the top of my head, and that's 8 weeks a term. Also, the cost of food is quite a lot in Cambridge. You can eat in Buttery, which is a canteen, but that adds up. And choice of supermarkets, we have a Marks and Spencer's in town centre, so you can shop there, but I do not. And there's also Sainsbury's. What's wrong with Sainsbury's? All fine, let's go to Sainsbury's. It is the most expensive Sainsbury's in the world. I'm not saying that as like a hyperbole. I have been told that as a fact, the Cambridge Sainsbury's is the most expensive Sainsbury's that exists in the world. The prices are comparable to Marks and Spencer's, so it's expensive food-wise. And further out in the city there are Tesco's and Aldi's, but I don't cycle, I walk, so I use Sainsbury's. Fairly expensive, but livable. Was it as good as I thought it was going to be? I didn't have very specific expectations, so it didn't have to really meet those. I think it was more work than I was anticipating, but that's okay. There can be some crazy experiences that you get at Cambridge that you just wouldn't get elsewhere. Like at the Cambridge Union, I saw a talk by John Bercow, by the stepsister of Anne Frank. Loads of famous people have spoken at the Union. It's a massive privilege. Also, May balls are amazing. They happen every June, which is ironic, I know. It's like an all-night party where they go all out. Colleges spend loads of money. Queen's May ball last year was insane. We had an ice rink, dodgems, zorb balls, people doing acrobatics with fire. Maisie Peters had an ABBA act, a drag performance, a Ferris wheel. Oh, I watched the sunrise on a Ferris wheel. That side of things, better than I could have imagined. Yeah, I think it was as good as I thought it was going to be. It wasn't immediately as good as I thought it was going to be though. I think the first year was quite difficult. It didn't get as good as I thought it was going to be quickly necessarily. Next, does it actually fit the stereotypes about everyone being posh and snobby, or is everyone pretty chill? You get some really extremely posh people and you get a bit more diversity maybe than some people expect, but then the average is very middle class. At home, I've always felt fairly middle class. I'm used to being surrounded by people more on the working class scale. At Cambridge, everyone sounds like me or posher, and okay, I don't mean everyone, but I always thought I was like middle of the road middle class, and now I'm at Cambridge, I'm lower middle class. I just haven't been exposed to people that don't go to state comprehensive school. So it's less that everyone's posh and snobby and more there are a few posh snobs and they make my skin crawl a little bit. You occasionally hear someone go, oh yeah, it was so upsetting. Fergus and Delilah did this awful thing, and I was just like, oh my goodness, can you do that somewhere else? You do get those, but then also I think it's mostly that people are just more middle class than I'm used to. Okay, next question. Do I feel like I'm missing out on fun experiences at university due to the Oxbridge work ethic? The short answer is no, but then it is more complicated than just a blanket no, because obviously at Cambridge and Oxford, you're expected to do a certain amount of work. So whereas at most Russell Group universities, if you do history, you'll write 2 essays a term. I've heard. I write an essay a week. It's the end of my second year and I estimate that I've written about 55-60 essays in my 2 years, just because of the amount of essays that you write per term, and then also in exam week, or maybe less than that actually, because in exam time I wrote not many essays, 50-ish. Someone's slamming their car door. Can you slam your car door some other time, please? What are you doing? What are you doing? Shh. Hold on, I'm gonna investigate. Okay, my next door neighbour was just repeatedly slamming his car door. Okay, where was I? I do a fair amount of work. Other courses are more demanding. With history, you don't get that many mandatory contact hours. There are lectures to go to, and that tends to be between 6 and 12 a week, but you're not expected to go to all of them. I just kind of go to the ones which I think are going to be the most useful to me. You go to supervisions, and that's 1 hour a week if you do history generally. So if you wanted to, you didn't want to do loads of work, you could do the minimum amount of reading. So rather than going through like 10 to 15 books and articles a week, which is what I tend to do, you could just read 5 a week, write a 2,000 word essay, and then go to your supervision and go out every night and go to loads of societies, do loads of plays. If you wanted to, you could do the bare minimum work and have loads of fun experiences. But at Oxbridge, yeah, we work hard, but also we play hard. Not many universities offer loads of formals every week. 3-course meals are amazing. I never thought I'd love them quite as much as I do, but that's one of the things I really miss about Cambridge. Obviously, I love the people and I miss the people, but second to the people are the formals. There are not many other places where you could go to garden parties on pretty lawns. Oh, I really miss it. Or like go to May Balls and hear Stephen Fry introduce the fireworks. Or like go to a Footlights play and watch the future faces of British comedy for £3. I think to a certain extent, maybe you miss out on the quantity of fun experiences if you want to get more than a 2-2. But the quality of the fun experiences, I think, is fairly unbeatable. Next up. Is there anything you wish you knew about Oxbridge before you started? Your essays in Cambridge are not meant to be the finished article. My supervision essays, they're not the end to my week. They are my process of learning, and then I will talk that through with my supervisor. And after the supervision, I will revise and look up and read more. So it's like your supervision essays don't need to be the be-all and end-all. You can afford within the first term especially to go out and meet people and make that your priority rather than trying to perfect your work. Next up, are children of rich parents more likely to be successful at Oxbridge because of a privileged education or maybe because of extra self-confidence? I don't think that there's necessarily much of an academic divide. Everyone at Cambridge suffers with a thing called imposter syndrome, which is where you look around you, you see all these supposedly really successful, really bright, intelligent people doing really well, and you think to yourself, oh, I don't really belong here. I don't really know if I'm good enough to be here. Everyone has it. I've had it several times, sometimes several times in a day. And I think if you are someone with a privileged education, with a lot of self-confidence, it might help to overcome that a little bit more. They're maybe more likely to be successful at Oxbridge because of the confidence thing. But also I don't think it's that much of an issue. I think people who have had less of a privileged education are maybe sometimes more used to organising their own time and being really self-motivated. Sometimes that can give state school people an edge to an extent. Yeah, so I don't think it's that clear-cut, but possibly. How easy is it to get a job after uni? Don't know, I haven't had a job after uni, I'm still at uni, but I reckon it will be easier than it might have been at another university because Cambridge Career Service is pretty good. What was the biggest culture shock? The conversations people have are very different to the conversations I would have here. I think that's more about people being really bright and engaged, but sometimes I find it difficult to keep up. The food as well. Like, I never had a souffle before. I'd never had pickled pear and lamb. Was it gratin? I don't even remember what it's called, but it was like a lamb thingy. I'd never had pate before. I'd seen it, I'd thought it looked gross, and I'd avoided it. The first formal I went to, I think they served guinea fowl, which was a lot. I also tried goat's cheese for the first time in Cambridge, and feta cheese, and harissa, and tahini. My roommate has told me about how wonderful pickled herring is. I think the food is quite a big culture divide. Another thing is students call academics by their surnames often, not to their faces, but like when they're talking about them, they go, Smith said that, and I really preferred, I don't know, Longbottom as my teacher, rather than like Mr. Lamp or Professor Scrooge or Barry. I think that was a bit weird, and I think that's a posh thing. Eating at formals as well. I used to eat, and I still do at home because I find it easier, with my fork in my right hand, my knife in my left hand, and sort of scooping it. And in formals, I feel like I should be more posh, so I sort of eat like a posh person. I remember I had a really awkward moment in my second formal. I was sitting opposite my DOS, and I put a green bean in my mouth. I'm used to eating like that, and I put it in my mouth like that, and it like poked out of my mouth. And I made really awkward eye contact and sort of did that. It was bad. Are the stereotypes of people being stuck up or posh true? There are some stuck up posh people, but also a lot of posh people are actually really nice. I think sometimes people's privilege, if they are unaware of it, winds me up, and that's something I've had to address by arguing with people. But again, I think the majority are just a little bit more middle class. When getting into Cambridge, they do have a quota. It does need to be at least 60% state school. So the majority are state school educated. Then a lot of people are educated at grammar schools. And there is a big difference as well between comprehensive schools and grammar schools. In my area, they don't have them. I always grew up thinking they were just in Kent, but they are all over the country, apparently. And loads of people that go to grammar schools get in because they're still state schools, but they've also had a better education than someone like me, for example, who just went to bog standard comprehensive school and had 30 people in my English A-level class. They're often very middle class. So yeah, it's less that everyone's stuck up and posh and more that people are very middle class. Out of Cambridge and Oxford, which is the best for psychology? I'm going to broaden this out to which subjects are better at which universities, and I think it really just depends on the person. It depends on what you're looking for in a course. I don't know about psychology specifically, but say for example you want to study politics. Now in Cambridge you either do an HSPS course, which is human, social, political sciences, so you will study politics alongside anthropology and sociology, or you do it with history, so you do a history and politics course. At Oxford, however, if you want to study politics, usually you would do that as part of a PPE course. A PPE course is politics, philosophy and economics, so that is more you are going to become a politician rather than like academic humanities subject. Courses are structured differently depending on where you go, so it really just depends on what you're looking for. Okay, next. Is it true that everyone is a privileged arse and acts like it too? I hope not, because I am there, so if everyone was a privileged arse, I would be too. Is the interview process really strict? I think strict maybe is the wrong word. It's difficult to get in, and it depends on whether you're talking about the interview process or the application process, because the application process is long. If you go to Cambridge, you have to send in your personal statement, examples of previous work, you have to fill out an 8-part survey. I sat a 2-hour exam, then I got an interview and I had a 2-part interview. I was interviewed by 4 different people in all, so it's long and there are lots of different steps to it. I wouldn't say it was strict though necessarily. I didn't find my interview too intimidating. Like, okay, I was like shaking, but at the same time I quite enjoyed my interview, which you're not really meant to say. Everyone always comes out saying, oh, I went so bad, I'm definitely not gonna get in. Oh look mummy, I got in, how wonderful. Out of the 4 people that interviewed me, only one of them I think was playing bad cop. They were all really nice, and I had a 2-part interview. So the first part I was just looking at a source and then talking about it. The second part I was talking about the essays that I'd sent in, and I wasn't expecting to talk about the essays I sent in, but I managed to like blag my way through it, and it wasn't question and answer, I always have to know the answer. It was more, how does your brain work? How are you going to function in a supervision environment where it's one-to-one, or in a very small group, and you're talking about the work that you've done and you're discussing quite complex concepts? How do you respond to unexpected questions? If I didn't know something, I would just say something like, oh, I'm not really sure about that specifically, but I do think this maybe, or I think I would be able to answer that question better if I knew what happened here. I don't think it was necessarily strict. With Cambridge interviews, they just kind of want to know how your mind works. It was difficult, long, but not necessarily strict. Next up, did you feel constant pressure to apply to Oxbridge from teachers? I know this person did, and that's awful, you shouldn't. I didn't feel any pressure to apply from Oxbridge from teachers at all. If anything, I wish they'd brought it up with me more, and I wish they'd bring it up with other people more, because I think a lot of people from state school have the potential to go to Oxbridge, but think it's this unattainable place that only absolute geniuses go to, and I am no genius Believe me. I think Oxbridge misses out on a lot of great state comprehensive applicants because they don't see themselves going. It hasn't been mentioned to them by teachers. So in some senses I wish there wasn't pressure, but there was more expectation that if you were bright you should at least apply for Oxbridge. Next question please. How difficult is it to get into Oxbridge from a state school? Not as difficult as you would think, clearly, because they let me in. What were they thinking? The maniacs! They have like a state school quota, and they normally exceed it, so they are very willing to let people from state school in. They really want to up their diversity. I think they struggle because private schools send hundreds and hundreds of people. State schools often don't send very many. There isn't the expectation there. There aren't like the Oxbridge streams or Oxbridge schemes where teachers hold your hand and with lots of experience tell you exactly how the process is going to go. At state comprehensive schools, often there isn't like a set path, whereas if you go to private school or public school, I think often people are pushed more to get into Oxbridge, and the schools are more used to sending people to Oxbridge, so they kind of know how the process works a little bit more. One of my friends had 7 practice interviews to go to Oxbridge, and I didn't even know they were going to bring up my essays. I think they have a lot more preparation. But at the same time, I don't think I was disadvantaged because I didn't have lots of extra practice. People at Cambridge really just want to know your mind and how your mind works, and so many people from state school really have what it takes, and they're really intelligent and clever and engaged, and they could totally do it. It's no more difficult for that sort of person to get in than someone exactly the same who went to Eton, apart from the extra help, but you know. What advice would you give to someone who is just about to start at Oxbridge? You shouldn't necessarily always prioritise academia over having a chat with someone. Try and make sure you get a good amount of balance. You are now competing against some of the brightest minds in the country, maybe the world. You don't have to outshine anybody. Getting average is wonderful. You don't always have to submit perfect work. You can sometimes be a mess, and that's completely fine. No one's expecting you to be the finished article. You're allowed to find the workload really difficult, and everyone's really understanding if you do. You don't be too hard on yourself, treat yourself kindly. Prioritise getting balance and being happy over academic success. Find things which help you unwind and do them a lot. Your first year is going to be rough, but stick through it. Okay, some people have a wonderful first year. Most people don't. Most people struggle, but it gets better. Be nice to yourself. Don't compare yourself to other people because everyone else is clever. That doesn't mean you're any less clever. Did I observe much of a divide between private school entrance and state school entrance? No, because grammar school fudges the gap. Sometimes it's really difficult to differentiate who was actually state school educated and who was privately educated, because people at grammar school, they're often quite privileged, so it's difficult to say there's an exact divide between private school and state school. What do I wish I knew before I applied? Everyone thinks of Oxbridge as a destination. You work really hard, you get the grades, you go through this really arduous interview and application process, and then you get there and it's wonderful, and then afterwards you get a job and you're set up for life. But no one really thinks about what it's going to be like once you're there. What's the process? It's not necessarily this academic idyll. The work is really difficult, the workload is a lot. Lots of people think of Oxbridge as a reward for doing really well at your A-levels, and I think you should think of Oxbridge as a process in itself. It's not a destination, it's just another step on the road, on the journey of life. Nearly at the end. Stay with me, stay with me. How has your experience with Access been when coming to Cambridge? If you don't know what Access is, it is the programme that Oxbridge have for trying to get a more diverse student body. What they do is really amazing. Despite what the media says, they spend millions on trying to get real diversity. There are lots of tours that go on, all that sort of thing, to try and get people from those backgrounds in. I didn't experience any of that really. I mean, I went to one talk, I think, when I was in year 10, and I was the only person there from my area. Everyone else was from Lewis. It's a bit more classy than Eastbourne. So I didn't really experience much of Access before coming to Cambridge, and now I'm here. Well, now I'm there. I'm not actually technically physically there. So sad. I can't pinpoint anywhere where Access has really helped me, or whether it's even really been present at all while I've been at Cambridge. I don't think it's necessarily needed to be, because I think all of the hurdles that I've faced as someone with my kind of background, lower middle class, state comprehensive kind of thing, almost all of them have been social and cultural rather than academic. So I don't think that Access has been particularly present in my Cambridge journey, and I don't think that's necessarily much of an issue, but I do think that my area don't get much access. I'm from the southeast, so it's not the most underprivileged, but they do have pockets of real hardship. They get overlooked because on average people are fairly well off, but there are lots of people from state comprehensives who could do with a bit of access and don't get it. This has been a really long video, so thank you for sticking with me. We have a really interesting last question. This person says, I read an article about working class students at Oxbridge feeling like they were just expected to know things, like it was taken as a given that they'd know French and Latin for the history course. Any thoughts on that? I know exactly the article that this person is talking about. I read it too, I think the day before I got this question submitted. It's an article by The Tab, and I have come across this. I personally did French A-level. J'ai le pouvoir de la langue française. Ah ouais, incroyable. The power of the French. I can speak a bit of French myself, so that hasn't been an issue. Although I think the French thing really hasn't come up with me personally. I chose to do more French than I was really faced with, and in general the courses I've done haven't really expected me to know any other languages, except to begin with when I chose my papers for my first year. One of those was paper 13, which means European history with the centuries around the year zero. Nil. Zero. Oh, look at that French. Amazing. Well done. Pat on the back. Those lectures were shared between the history faculty and the classics department, and a lot of the students there were classics students, and the main professor there was a classics professor. Now, classics is a very middle class / upper class degree because it focuses a lot on Latin and ancient Greek. It is very rare. I don't know if it's even possible to do classics without having previous experience in at least Latin. No comprehensive schools teach Latin, so classics tends to be quite an elite subject. These lectures were being put on by that department, and I remember the lecturer just making so many references to Latin and using Latin words and phrases, and I just had no idea what he was talking about. I got really lost, very bored, felt completely out of my depth, and did a medieval paper instead. Apart from that, everyone's been very understanding, and I haven't really come across that. It is there. I think Cambridge is primarily built for posh people. They are adapting. You know, I've functioned there, not doing too badly. I'm still alive. I'm still keeping up just with my course, so it's okay. And on that note, it's empty. We got to the end. Thank you so much for joining me. Oh, is that going to balance? Yes. Thank you so much for joining me on this Cambridge journey. I hope this was useful to you. I hope you liked the video. Tell me what you liked and disliked in the comments if you want. If you don't want to, that's fine. It's a free world. I'm not going to force anyone to do anything except you, Jeremy. I don't know a Jeremy. Thanks for coming back. Subscribe, like it, a little thumbs up. That would be nice. Thanks. And recommend this to anyone you know who is thinking of going to Oxbridge or applying, or you think has the potential. We can encourage a bit more social mobility, which I think is very important in this country. It's something this country lacks, and I think we need a bit more of it. So thank you for watching. Love to all. Subscribe. Read my blog. Goodbye. Bloopers. Can you go away, please? Can you please be quiet? I'm trying to film a video. There's the tea, sis. Can you please be quiet? I'm trying to film a video. Ta-da! Is grammar? I know not. Can you go away? Let me film a video. Ooh, ooh, ooh.